It had been a long day at the hospital. Dr. Allison Parker, a 38-year-old internal medicine specialist at Crestview Medical Center, loosened her ponytail and rubbed her temples as she reviewed the last patient file on her tablet. She'd already seen over 20 patients that day, ranging from the mundane cases of flu to more urgent heart complications. She loved her work, but lately, the burnout had started to whisper in her ear more frequently. Her pager buzzed room 314. It was a last-minute walk-in. Her shift was technically over, but something in her gut urged her to check this one herself. As she entered the room, she was greeted by a man in his late 30s, sitting on the examination bed. His demeanor was calm but guarded. He looked up, and their eyes locked for a moment longer than expected. "I'm Dr. Parker," she said, professional and composed. "What brings you in today?" "Name's Jason Reed," he replied with a half-smile. "I've been having shortness of breath and some tightness in the chest. Thought it might be time to stop ignoring it." She nodded, noting the signs of fatigue in his face. "Let's take a look." As she examined him, they made small talk. She learned that Jason was a firefighter, recently back on duty after an injury. He had a quiet strength about him, and yet his eyes betrayed a sadness she couldn't quite place. Their conversation drifted beyond the usual clinical questions: family, stress levels, even favorite pizza toppings. By the time she finished the checkup, she realized they had spoken for almost half an hour. "I'll run some tests," she said. "It might be stress-related, but we should rule out cardiac causes." "Thanks, Doc," he said. "You've got a great way of making people feel safe." Her heart skipped a beat, not out of attraction, but because she hadn't felt that level of human connection in a long time. Not since her divorce 2 years ago. She brushed it off as professionalism. She was just doing her job. But Jason wasn't just another patient. Over the next few weeks, he returned for follow-ups, and each time their conversations deepened. They talked about their pasts, their fears, and their quiet hopes. Allison found herself looking forward to those brief appointments more than she cared to admit. One evening, after a particularly long shift, she ran into him outside the hospital. He was leaning against his truck, sipping coffee, and looking up at the dusky sky. "Long day?" he asked with a grin. "The longest," she replied, walking over. They stood there in silence for a while before he spoke again. "You always take on the weight of your patients, don't you?" She blinked, surprised by his insight. "I guess I do. You don't have to do it alone." There it was, that quiet, genuine tone he always had. It caught her off guard, and before she could stop herself, she admitted, "Sometimes it feels like I've forgotten how to let people in." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time someone reminded you." They didn't say much more, but in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. An understanding, a bridge being built with each shared word, each quiet second. Weeks turned into months. Jason's tests came back normal, but he continued coming by under the guise of updates or minor concerns. Allison never turned him away. Her colleagues started to notice the spring in her step, the smile that lingered longer than usual. One Saturday, Jason invited her to a local community fundraiser hosted by the fire department. She hesitated at first. It was outside her professional comfort zone. But she went, and she laughed. For the first time in years, she felt present. At the event, Jason introduced her to his fellow firefighters as the doctor who saved me. She looked at him, puzzled. He leaned in and whispered, "Not just my health. You helped me remember how to feel again." They danced under the string lights. Nothing romantic yet, just a dance between two people whose lives had quietly intertwined. Course lines had to be respected. Allison remained careful not to cross boundaries. She reminded herself that emotional entanglement with a patient, even a former one, could blur the ethics she held dear. But Jason eventually asked, after being formally discharged as her patient, "Would it be wrong to ask you out for real this time?" She didn't answer right away. She needed time. Her past made her cautious. Her profession made her disciplined. But her heart was no longer quiet. It was curious. She finally said yes, on one condition. Only if you let me choose the restaurant. They had dinner at a quiet Italian place she loved. Conversation flowed effortlessly. They spoke of everything and nothing. And when he walked her to her car, they stood by the driver's side for a long while. I never expected any of this when I walked into that hospital, he said. Neither did I, she replied softly. Sometimes the most unexpected connections are the ones that heal us the most. They didn't rush anything. Over time they nurtured what they'd found. Allison introduced him to her teenage daughter, and Jason, in turn, introduced her to his elderly mother who he'd been caring for quietly. Their connection wasn't perfect. It had its hurdles. Balancing demanding careers, emotional baggage, and public perceptions wasn't easy. But they had mutual respect, understanding, and something Allison had almost given up on: hope. One spring afternoon, months into their growing relationship, Jason stood in front of Allison outside her townhouse. You know, he said, handing her a coffee just the way she liked it, you've been more than a doctor to me. She smiled, tilting her head. You've been more than a patient to me. And now, she said, taking a sip and locking eyes with him, you're someone I'm choosing. And in that quiet suburban street, under the shade of blooming trees, two people who had once been strangers in a hospital room stood hand in hand. Proof that sometimes healing happens in the most unexpected ways.